Hello and welcome. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Joe Luchs. Joe is the founder and CEO of Datalinx, an AI-based data refinery startup that's reimagining how businesses process and leverage their data assets in advance of entering generative AI projects. Joe brings over 15 years of deep expertise in the intersection of tech, data, and marketing. Most recently, he spent 4 years at Amazon, where he served as global head of AWS plus Amazon Ads, leading these two powerhouse divisions. In that role, he was the principal viaduct between ads and AWS when Amazon brought their crucial clean room product called Amazon Marketing Cloud to market. Joe managed everything from sales and go-to-market strategy to partnerships and PD, ultimately generating billions in total contract value and earning recognition from Mr. Jassy in their annual shareholder letter. It's wild. Before Amazon, I was the commercial founder and head of revenue at Beeswax, an ad tech company that helped grow into one of the hottest MarTech companies in our industry. Under Joe's leadership, Beeswax landed at number 46 on the Inc. 5000, at number 4 on Crane's Fast 50 just before being acquired by Comcast. Joe's career spans the evolution of digital advertising and data platforms with leadership roles a little while back at BlueKai in advance of their acquisition by Oracle, and even working in the NFL, giving him a unique perspective on how data flows through the modern marketing system. When Joe's not running around building companies, he's an active angel investor and advisor supporting innovative startups across AI consultancy, data management, and even vegan cookie dough ventures. A man after my own heart there. Joe, welcome. Would you like to tell the ladies and gentlemen a bit more about yourself and what you're working on these days?
Yeah. Well, that was a great introduction. Thanks for rolling out the red carpet like that. So I think you described a lot of my experience as well, but all of those have kind of come together to help inform our vision for Datalinx, which is in the past, so many organizations had issues with data, and it just made it really difficult for them to do things like understand their customers, deliver their customers great experiences, and so forth. And in this AI era, when you have these incredibly powerful engines that can take information and use that to then generate these great experiences for customers, most organizations are running into one central problem, which is that their data is messy. So after dealing with this data messiness issue for the better part of 2 decades, it felt like it was about time to come up with a very elegant way of helping folks specifically prep consumer data so they can deliver the best experiences possible to their customers.
Yeah, I mean, look, the data, there's a crisis out there. I mean, data quality crisis, it's all over the place. I mean, anything you're going to build in AI is only as good as what your data infrastructure is on the back end. I mean, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your journey in this whole world that we're entering now. From data collection, BlueKai, to activation at Beeswax, and really blowing that into enterprise scale, at Amazon, and now where you're sort of seeing it, sort of reversing, going back a little bit with data prep with Datalinx.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really interesting because when we launched BlueKai, that was very, very early in the data game. I would say that most organizations would not consider themselves data driven at that point. Or maybe, they might say they were, but like they weren't actually
Well, they
doing
would
much of
say it, but under the covers.
And what was interesting, right, is that BlueKai paradigm, right? Of course, there's the CRM systems at that time, and there were folks who were, capturing all sorts of customer records. They can kind of, keep track of what folks were doing and then try and, again, deliver them better experiences based on that. But BlueKai was very much kind of in that early cookie era, right? We were collecting information based on just what anonymous users were browsing on the internet. So if you went and search for a flight, as an example, we could capture those dates. We could capture the locations that you were going to and from. And then just in a very kind of simple and kind of binary fashion, we could help deliver things like personalized offers to somebody just based on what they'd searched for in the past. It was very, very simple, it's just cookie based, right? Pretty straightforward. Then we got into the beeswax era. And one of the things that I really loved about beeswax was that was actually when we started to get into this kind of much more ML-driven type world. So a lot of organizations had moved past very simple binary targeting, and I shouldn't say a lot, I should say some advanced percentage of customers. And then they were starting to think about things like, okay, well, how could we actually, predict what a customer might want or need, and then give them the information or the products they need to actually purchase something that might be relevant for them, as an example. And so actually a great example is one of our large enterprises. They had a very, very specific metric. They were an app, but they didn't just want to drive a download. They wanted to actually drive the first action once a customer had that in the app. And so they actually use pretty advanced machine learning to optimize towards a customer completing that first action of the app. And that was incredibly effective for them. And because of Beeswax, we're actually allowing folks to co-locate their cloud infrastructure with ours and do things like real-time data appends and real-time data decisioning.
Roughly, what year was this? Roughly, work timeline, ballpark.
I mean, Beeswax, we were kind of innovating in this kind of custom bidding, custom data pen space for about 2016 to 2021.
This was really like leading edge at that point, what you're talking about.
Absolutely. There were countless numbers of meetings I had with customers where they were like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
I'm sure. By the way, they probably couldn't even like comprehend kind of where you were going with this. Today, you take it for granted, but just to frame that up, this is like what, 8 years ago, nobody was doing this stuff then. I mean, this was really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. Credit to R.A. Paparo, who I think is one of the greatest minds in this kind of marketing and advertising technology world. He recognized that there were a good amount of customers out there that just had advanced use cases and they wanted to be able to apply kind of the latest and greatest technology. With that said, one key learning there is that one, the technical personas and the marketing personas, at least at the time, weren't regularly interacting. There were some pretty big divides there. Now, the good news is that is getting a lot better now. We're seeing a lot more kind of, I'll just say, nice collaboration within a lot of kind of large and medium-sized enterprises across the tech groups and the marketing groups. So, art and science coming together. But at the time, it was amazing to be able to see like a very large enterprise actually deploy data scientists to solving marketing and advertising problems. Now, I will note that we had a very large customer at Beeswax who didn't sign their contract for 2 years. And then when they finally signed the contract, they were like, oh yeah, our data was a mess. So we just had to fix our data and then we could sign the contract. And I was like, cool. It would have been really nice for you guys to tell me that. I wasn't actually sure what was taking so long. Super interesting to know that that was kind of the challenge that held them back from actually pursuing these really advanced applications. And then sure enough, I find myself starting Datalinx many years later to solve that exact problem. And our solution to prep their data in 2 months rather than 2 years.
And Joe, this is like 7-8 years ago. This problem existed 7-8 years ago. Nobody really has gotten in all that time out in front of this. It's amazing. I mean, there's people out there talking about this, but it's not like, hey, this goes back to the dawn of time in our space, garbage in, garbage out. I mean, it's shocking that all these years later, you're touching on getting the data folks and the marketing folks to hold hands. And I've been there. I feel your pain. It's not always the easiest thing in the world to do, but you had to do that. I mean, in a pretty big way at Amazon, where you brought together ads and AWS, which is, some of the biggest technical minds, the biggest marketing folks, in the world. You did that though, and you were able to really, really get these folks together. And, what's interesting is that I made the chronology not exactly right, but I think directionally, Amazon opened up advertising on Prime Video and then AMC relatively close together. And I can tell you that without really having the AMC component, because look, at the end of the day, advertising on Prime Video, it's totally upper funnel. It's as pretty much as high as you can get. And then they had to also wave in a lot of non-endemic folks too, Kia, Carnival, and some non-endemic folks. I think the only way that was going to be the cash register that it is for Amazon is with a product like AMC that sits on top of that to prove efficacy. And I just wonder if you could just share a little bit about your journey on orchestrating all that stuff together.
Yeah. I mean, and that was a fascinating journey. Got some gray hairs from it, but had a good time. So you're spot on, right? So, when you're doing something like Amazon sponsored ads, or you're doing something like Google search, that experience, right, is very endemic. You search for something and you get a result, right? And then you show a sponsor. There's a lot of nuance to it, and you can be really good or really bad at that those executions. But candidly, like Amazon just built an amazing tool set around sponsored ads that just made it a lot easier for folks to, not necessarily have to like build a lot or do like a ton of really advanced analytics and things like that. But then as you think about all the other elements of Amazon advertising, right? Like whether that is owned and operated properties like Prime Video or Twitch, or whether that is buying third-party inventory through, a million different partners, Comcast, Paramount Plus, like all
Sure. And
those.
you're seeing that now with the Roku relationship. They're extending
Right.
that, right?
It's a great example, yeah. And so as you start to do all these activations through all these other publishers and kind of audience capabilities and so forth, that's actually where you need much more advanced analytics. And so, the leaders of AMC, Kirat Sharma, Alan Lewis, Paula Despens, these folks listen to customers and realize that, we actually needed to get provide a greater level of insight, privacy protections included, right? So that's why it was a clean room.
Yep.
But we need to provide we need to provide a greater level of insight into just, what's actually going on under the hood. And how can a customer, whether that be an enterprise or an agency, just figure out, the right way to be able to kind of operate this tool set to be effective. And at the end of the day, just make sure you deliver really good customer experiences. And so the journey was really interesting because, Amazon ads, right, started largely with sponsored ads. Then, we expanded our owned and operated.
And Bezos didn't even want to do that, right? Like he didn't want to have ads. I mean, a million years ago, he was not 100% with that until
for a very, very long time. Bezos was anti-ads and prevented the company from doing those advertising experiences on the e-commerce platform. I think, the story goes that the tide eventually turned because, if you actually survey consumers, what they'll tell you is that they actually don't mind ads. They just want the ads to be relevant. With some exceptions, right? You can have like too high of an ad load or something like that, right? But most consumers understand that they're getting free or less expensive stuff if they see ads. And that's just kind of how the internet typically monetizes. And so what consumers typically want is they just want better ads. And so when you, again, listen to customers, you eventually realize, okay, well, as long as these experiences aren't intrusive, as long as they're relevant, and as long as they allow the consumer to get something for free or for less money, people are pretty down. And so we listened. We launched ads. And then that journey went quickly from sponsored ads to many more ads properties. Then AMC launched as basically just a way to provide. AMC started as just like, let's just take post-campaign data, put that into a clean room and give customers the ability to run SQL queries and, learn how effective that advertising experience was and what they should be better at.
And these are basically the beginning of signals, right? Like that's how you're thinking of that?
That's right. Yeah. Now, with that said, though, and this is where I came in, one of the big things that we needed to do is we needed to connect customer data with Amazon data. And by customer data, I mean first-party data that might have been collected by a large enterprise, an automaker, a travel and hospitality company, whatever it may be. Because the reality is the most valuable data any customer has is their first-party data. That's part of why at Datalinx, we're so focused on helping people get their first-party data right, because that is their most valuable asset. And if they're not using that first party data correctly, their business is going to suffer dramatically because of it. So that was a challenge, right? Helping customers get their first party data right was a real journey. I remember talking to a financial services company and we're, saying, hey, like, let's get your first party data into Amazon Marketing Cloud because then you'll be able to do better things like measurement, better audience modeling and so forth. And then sure enough, what we actually encountered is them saying, oh, our data is actually in 11 different silos owned by 3 different teams, and it is an absolute disaster. So call us in 3 years, and then we'll be able to put our first-party data in your systems. That was it was a mind-blowing conversation. And again, part of our mission at Datalinx is to help resolve a lot of those challenges. God, 11 different silos with multiple different teams owning it. I mean, just imagine how much better of experiences they could deliver to their customers if they broke down those silos, if they actually use that data to deliver better experiences. Even just like trying to basic compliance for a financial services organization. I don't even understand how you do that effectively if your first party data is a mess. So there are instances like that that were just really tricky, but that's where AWS plus apps came in. Is we wanted to help folks that were storing their data in AWS or some data warehouse on top of AWS, like Databricks or Snowflake. And we wanted to help make sure that they had their data right in AWS. And then we wanted to help them use things like clean rooms to actually connect their data with Amazon data or any third-party data providers that might be relevant. And then sure enough, with that connected data foundation and what we call it kind of a customer three, where we ended up landing was these folks could do better measurement, figure out what ads were actually relevant, resonated. They could build better audiences so they could deliver more personalized experiences that have a higher relevancy to the customer. And so the folks that actually did the work to prep their data, connect the data sets, did really well. And probably my biggest takeaway coming out of that was, well, it's really hard to prep the data. I don't want these organizations to have to do this in-house or on their own with very limited resources. I want to build an elegant software solution that'll make it really easy for them to prep their data so they can get all of those benefits without having to do all the manual work themselves.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like, look, if I had to guess, I'm guessing the financial services company didn't have all these silos because they probably wanted to, but a lot of that might have been privacy, might have been compliance, might have been whatever. But it's forcing a transformation into like a new way of measuring things. And I think the clean room concept is so incredibly valuable. You're basically, you guys got out in front of a cookieless future, but Google still can't get away from cookies. I mean, they're still with that, they still have it. Talk a little, if you would, of how, what AMC did, it enabled the industry. If you knew what you were doing with it and you had a good agency partner that knew how to run it, you got away from this black box, like, this old John Wanamaker quote, 50% of my ads are wasted. I just don't know which, blah, blah, blah. But you guys basically got away from that. And you put a whole lot more granularity into the whole conversation. So you knew, I mean, who was seeing it upstream, downstream, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, what did that do to, candidly, not only just ad sales at Amazon, but also the ability for brands to really do proper full funnel media? Because without that real measurement, it's tough. It's tough to see where it was coming and going from. And, also, if you could talk a little bit about what that meant to omni-channel measurement, because my team did a lot of that, only enabled by AMC.
Yeah. Not to sound like I, overconsume the Amazon Kool-Aid, but one of the principles that stuck with me the most.
But nobody else is doing this out there. I mean, candidly, none of the other ad tech out there is able to mechanize itself across an omnichannel footprint. Not effectively. I mean, you got to string a lot of stuff together. This is just cohesive within the four walls of Amazon and their extended partnerships.
Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate the vote of confidence towards Amazon. Obviously, that was our mission. There's plenty of advertising companies, Google's, Meta's of the world, right, that would say they have kind of a comparable solution. I think the thing that we did really well across Amazon, and I think applying kind of an Amazon principle, working backwards. At the end of the day, you want to work backwards from whatever the outcome or goal is. And, we kind of applied that Amazon principle. Let's work backwards from the transaction and use that to really map the customer journey and understand all the different kind of points of interaction that led up to the customer inevitably making the decision we wanted them to make. In that regard, I think we did a good job of designing the system so that we could really look at the customer journey end to end. And not only just, from point of awareness to initial transaction, but also going past that to loyalty and lifetime value and things like that. I think that's why Amazon ads, sponsored ads, obviously, I think it's just been on an incredible growth path for a variety of reasons. But if we think about the rest of Amazon ads, I think a big part of why the organization is doing so well is because we applied that principle of let's look at every possible interaction we could think of that led to a specific goal or outcome for one of our enterprise customers and led to some, good enough experience for a consumer that they actually made a purchase. And let's just, provide a level of visibility into that such that an enterprise can kind of continue to make those good decisions. What's the quotation? It's from, measure what matters, but it's roughly like, you can't optimize anything if you're not measuring it. And so providing this really Yeah. Measurement ends up being the foundation for making any good possible decision you could think of, whether that is digital advertising or any business or even your personal life. If you're tracking towards good outcomes versus bad outcomes and making decisions based on that, you find yourself in a good spot. And then again, going back to data links, it really is all predicated on data, all measurement, all kind of personalization, all optimization. Every single one of these things is just a decision that you're making based on past data. And that's why, at the end of the day, I've been a data nerd for 20 years and why I will always be a data nerd. Because it's the only way you can actually make good decisions.
You mentioned also at the top of our conversation about the people stuff, and I'm just big on that. I've gone through a lot of pilot purgatory problems, where you just can't you just hit these impasses. And, you really, really have to spend, I think, a lot of time level setting and communicating, look here from finance, from the brand folks, from the marketing folks. Here's what the phasing is going to look like. Here's what the elevator stops are going to be across the whole journey of this project. It's tough stuff. I mean, so much of this comes down to people stuff and organizational changes. But I think one of the most challenging things, and I think we're, candidly with Datalinx, as a whole lot of value to an organization is to say, listen, we've all tried to implement AI, ML stuff at this point, and we've hit brick walls. And those brick walls create this feeling of, of frustration in the organization. And that just lends to just more people stuff, these projects getting harder and harder to implement. I think where you're coming from with your new venture is to say, listen, let's take one of the hardest, most complicated things out of the equation, which is to clean everything up first, so that we're not getting 8/10 of the way through a project and going, oh, you know what, we don't have anything like what we need to really execute this.
So are we inevitably just getting down to how do we solve the people problem?
Look, I think if you eliminate, this data cleanliness issue and you just remove that from the whole conversation, I think it takes a lot of layers out of this. Because look, at the end of the day, you're going to have these silos, right? Marketing folks aren't going to necessarily be the closest to the technical side. The technical people, they're going to have to go to the marketing folks to go get the data. You're going to get these fiefdoms and this and that. But if you have a product that just sits on top of that and cleans it up, democratizes it, I think that takes a whole lot of the downstream frustration out of the whole conversation. And quite honestly, there's not a lot of people out there talking about this. You'll read white papers and these futurologists and this and that and say, oh, just going to wave an AI wand over things. And it's just not like that. We're not there yet. You've got to do the foundational stuff well first.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think there's a few layers to it that I think help get the people where they need to be. So one is just, frankly, like we're in a really interesting environment where a lot of organizations are resource constrained. And so, it's a necessity breeds invention in a lot of cases. And this is part of, where we're at with our Datalinx journey. A lot of folks we're just talking to are we simply do not have the resources to devote to incredibly commoditized data preparation work. And so there's kind of the macroeconomic, borrowing Zuckerberg's year of efficiency term, but a lot of organizations are trying to drive efficiencies and not having to deploy humans to do really commoditized work. I think going to help to drive adoption of solutions that just make commoditized work a lot more simple. So AI is very good at handling commoditized work. Resource constraints motivate folks to look for kind of AI and software solutions rather than people solutions. So the macroeconomic situation is certainly going to push certain things like this. The second thing I'll just say is that simplicity is a beautiful thing, right? Yeah. And there's so many organizations that are they have their AI engine. They just bought their new AI Ferrari. And then they show up to the gas station. And then when they get to the gas station, they just want to pump gas. But then they're told, oh, actually, you got to drill into the ground, extract the oil, refine the oil. Then you got to put that into the gas pump. And then you can put that in your AI engine. And then you can go drive your AI Ferrari and have a nice time. Nobody wants to build their own data refinery. Nobody wants to just, go through this very extensive process. What they would rather do is just show up to the gas pump, have clean data, and then be able to go do interesting things with that data. That's very much what Datalinx is focused on, but it comes back to the fact that most of these business leaders are just trying to improve revenue, improve their cost basis. They don't want to necessarily have some overly complex in-house process that takes too much time, takes too many resources, is very opaque and unstructured, and so forth. And so we're seeing kind of a big push just to try and improve access to data, simplicity of data, flexibility of data, and so forth. And then the third thing I'll say is just that one nice thing, right? It's Amazon, as an example. Connecting the IT personas and the business personas was a chore. It was like trying to get the French and Italians to agree on what the best type of bread is. It was a really, really hard problem where people
I
just
have that in my house, by the way. My wife is
okay,
French.
okay, yeah, okay, yeah. You
No,
know this.
I know this well. I know this
Yeah.
situation. And by the way, get them both started on a conversation about coffee.
God, yeah. Then I mean, again, this is how I got my gray hairs. But one thing that is nice is I'm seeing these organizations actually start to talk to each other more. Sorry, say these internal groups within organizations start to talk to each other more. And I think that because data is kind of the lifeblood of any well-run organization at this point, there's just kind of this understanding, or seems to be this growing understanding, that you just really do need these technical teams to be able to effectively interact with the business teams that they're supporting. Because if tech is doing, tasks in a vacuum and they don't know what the outcome's going to be, they can't work backwards from the goal that they're supposed to be achieving. And then the business folks, if they're kind of ambivalent to what's happening on the tech side, all they're going to do is be throwing their hands up and complaining that they don't have the data they need. Not actually going to help solve the problem. A big part of what we're building into the Datalinx user experience is observability, transparency throughout the entire data journey. Everything from data lineage to consent management to anomaly detection. And these things go a long way in just kind of building trust between these groups and making sure that these folks are communicating effectively. And most importantly, are actually solutioning together rather than just complaining about one side or the other.
The anomaly detection, that's what I think one of the most important features that you're building. I'll tell you why. If you look at marketing resources and dollars and everything today, I mean, I don't have to tell you, companies are cutting here, everywhere. Every marketing dollar, they're not infinite, they're very finite. And you need, as a marketing leader, as a good chief digital officer, chief marketing officer, what have you, you really, really have to stretch the dollar to make 1 + 1 = something more than 2. You have to do it today, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're needing to basically marshal national resources to do some digital stuff. What's interesting though is that, and I bring this all back to omnichannel. So when you have a multi-channel retailer, I can't tell you how many, and my teams have done this over the years, look for weird stuff. Go into the back end of Google and see how that overlays with the back end of Amazon in terms of customer behavior, interactions. And we weren't even calling it anomaly detection, just looking to see where there's sort of interesting tidbits. Take some of that and then just go put a few dollars here, a few dollars there, and then see what works, what sticks, what doesn't. Invariably, some things stick, some don't. So you're trying things, you're constantly trying things. But the idea to automate, a true anomaly detection system like that, where you're basically looking for commonalities of the omnichannel shopper. Does the Amazon shopper in consumables, does she also have a big crossover at Costco on the weekends? Okay, great. There is. Okay. So I want to know, say I'm a non-endemic brand on Amazon. I want to go blow out football pitch, whatever. I don't even sell on Amazon, but I got a huge Costco business, right? For a variety of reasons, that could happen. You got a huge Costco business. I want to blow Monday to Friday performance media on national ads through the Amazon footprint, now Roku and a variety of the other ones, knowing that I'm able to get empirical data that I saw a lift out at Costco on the weekends. So much of that just comes from, my prior lives, manual anomaly detections. But just talk a little, if you would, where you're seeing that sort of really have a lot of strong hooks into omni-channel retailing.
Oh, omni-channel retailing. Well, I think that there's so many different factors that can influence product demand. And not to mention, you also have to manage the supply side, right? You have to make sure that, you have a clean supply line and you're not out of stock on certain units. You want to make sure to keep innovating with your product catalog. There's all of these, and again, all of this is just data. Easy example, right? If you're selling umbrellas, you've got to factor weather into, your expected umbrella demand and so forth. You got to build, supply chains to be able to actually fulfill umbrella delivery in specific parts of the country that maybe have more rain or experiencing certain kind of, weather patterns and things like that. And so, the thing that AI is really good at is pattern recognition. Now, humans, generally speaking, are good at pattern recognition, right? Like it's neural networks, right? Was one of the kind of innovations that try to follow human pattern recognition. But even just like take autonomous driving as an example, right? That is simply just recognizing patterns. Whether that is being able to recognize a pedestrian, whether that's being able to look at the color of the stoplight. These are the types of patterns that these autonomous tools can manage. AI is really good at this as well. What you really don't want to have is you really don't want to have what you were describing, which is people manually going in to some data system and saying, yeah, let me like look for some spike or
But it's a bunch of systems, right? Like you're talking about, like what I'm talking about is looking at what happened in Google, what happened in Meta, what happened in TikTok, et cetera. And then just, okay, let's just find some random pattern recognition, throw some money at it, try a few things. If it works, great. If not, kill it, do something different. But there's so manual and random, quite honestly.
And that's the thing, right? Is like what you want is you want your AI analyst to be constantly combing through the data and every, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, like whatever cadence at which it's actually reviewing the data that's available. And not just your data. You also want to bridge that with kind of industry data. So just as an example of a partner company of ours, a company called Datalinx.AI, founded by Kyle Kizik. What they have combined is customers' in-house data with all sorts of kind of industry data that can actually kind of help map these different pieces together and help to be able to automate decisions like that. But what you want is once you have your data right, you then want the AI tool to actually look through that data for you and then be able to actually send you a notification and say, hey, we're seeing a massive, massive spike in demand for this specific SKU or ASIN, right? Okay, why are we seeing that spike? What are the different patterns associated with that, right? You also want the AI to be able to tell you those things. You want the AI to say, yeah, like we're seeing X, Y, and Z kind of, macroeconomic or weather patterns or supply shocks or whatever it may be that are leading to this spike in this anomaly. And so then you as a business owner, you don't have to go and search the data. You don't have to go and like manually find these and try and contextualize and understand it. It gives you the information you need to then say, okay, understood. So we need to optimize X, Y, and Z kind of like shipping routes or supply lines to be able to actually, deliver on these retail experiences and advertising experiences that exist across these different channels. And so AI, I heard a funny analogy the other day. You know, AI is good at recognizing patterns. AI also doesn't get tired. AI doesn't.
That's true, by the way.
AI doesn't need food. AI doesn't need, like tender loving care from a manager. AI will
Didn't get in an argument with the spouse, kids, it doesn't have to worry about, what they're doing, all this stuff that like humans, it's inevitable, right?
Yeah, yeah. And meanwhile the AI will just, cruise through kind of their responsibilities to check the data every hour, 6 hours, 24 hours, whatever it may be, look for spikes or anomalies in the data, and then be able to surface that. And then as you can imagine also, so the most basic, detect an anomaly. Hey, we are seeing a spike. And then maybe you just have to go and understand that. Okay, great. What happened? What are the factors that are leading to this and so forth? Phase two, the AI detects the anomaly and then explains why it thinks that anomaly is occurring. Then step three, you get to a point where AI makes a decision based on it, but you have to approve the decision. So it's human in the loop, right? And then step four, the AI makes the optimization on its own. It's been trained well. It has guardrails around it. It understands what it needs to do to solve the problem. So it just does it. And that's kind of like you could think of that as like kind of a progression for how you might use the combination of your data and a combination of AI tools to actually deliver those kind of optimized experiences for customers and help make sure that everybody has access to, everybody can order an umbrella on Amazon.com if they want to, because the umbrella maker has figured out all the necessary steps they need to take.
And you're really seeing, I think, the early days too of agentic shopping. I saw Apple recently, in their, I think it's CarPlay Ultra, so which is the next generation of CarPlay. There's nodes in there for shopping, Joe. I don't know whether you saw this or not. So you're going to be driving your car and, picking the kids up, running errands, whatever, you're shopping right from your car. They're actually doing that. But so much of that, now that's all like really, really cool stuff. But it really comes down to, if you don't have a bedrock of clean, solid data, all of these zippity doodah tools that we as a marketing world are going to have access to now, and it's early, but these are going to get evolved really, really fast. I mean, there's going to be a lot of quick evolutions and quick turns on these things. But if you don't have foundational stuff right, to your point, you're going to be selling an umbrella to a guy in Los Angeles where it hasn't rained in 2 weeks. Now, what are your thoughts on future proofing this whole thing in terms of where we're all headed as an industry?
Yeah, I'll say, I think there's a few things. So the first one I'll just say is, and account for my bias in this, but you got to get your data right. If you want to be a durable organization that can be competitive in this era, you have to get your data right, because it powers everything. It'll power your customer experiences. It'll power your AI tools you might adopt. Like across the board, there's just going to be, I think, really kind of if you have the right fuel, then you can run your engine really well. Just to borrow that analogy. I think the second thing is having really, really smart guardrails. So I think, I see kind of two mentalities often occurring. So one is, oh yeah, like I had this weird experience with AI, or I saw this silly thing happen with, so I don't trust it. Right. And then, they get burned once and then they're like, really hesitant.
You get one swing at that, right? Is really what you're saying.
Well, I mean, the problem is though, is that, a lot of folks are like setting up these AI tools without guardrails. The assumption when you set up an AI tool initially is that it might have hallucinations, right? It might make mistakes. If you're not going in with that assumption and then actually taking steps like, MCP server deployment or RAG frameworks that actually put some guardrails around the system, yeah, you're probably going to get burned. And so you got to be really smart about that.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the equation is they feel like they need to have too much control. And then for that reason, everything moves slowly. Everything is much more inefficient than it needs to be. And then you end up in this position where, you've kind of over-parented your AI.
Great word.
The AI just can't do a lot. And so you have to strike the balance where you let the power of AI actually kind of run. You don't want to limit it too much because it is really powerful technology. But you also want to just go in eyes wide open. Hey, this thing needs guardrails, like hallucinations, mistakes.
Do no evil, these sorts of things.
Yes, like ethics, ethical boundaries.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. I mean, constitutional AI is like, we could have a whole hour on that. But if you're going in with, either too far one end of the spectrum or the other, you're not going to actually build durability in terms of how you use AI and how you grow your business. And every business must be AI enabled in the future. Like that is going to be the only way in which you can run an efficient operation, deliver for customers and so forth. And so get your data right, get your AI right, put the right kind of guardrails in place that allow you to move fast, but also make sure that you're limiting mistakes and limiting risk. And that's how you build a durable business in this kind of modern AI era.
Indeed. I know you got to run. Thank you. I'm so grateful for your time, my friend.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. And we'll do this again soon.
Bye, Joe.